I've just wrapped up my time with the latest technical preview flight of Halo Infinite, with this flight focusing on 12v12 big team battles on the map Fragmentation. It's my first bit of hands-on time with Halo Infinite, so here are my thoughts.
The enemy has seized a zone. Contested zone. File
So I have some important notes to start on with this. First, this isn't a beta yet even. This is just a technical preview. 343 have been really careful to emphasize that this is a technical preview, which is focused more on player counts, scale, that sort of thing. And as such, there were always going to be some rough edges. I found a few, I'm going to talk about them in the hopes that that feedback helps a little bit. Secondly, my access to this preview was provided by Xbox ANZ through their Game Pass Ambassador program, so I want to thank them for arranging that for me. I'm super grateful to be part of the program and for all of the opportunities that it provides. My final note here, I don't have a ton of history with Halo. I played Halo Combat Evolved on an old iMac G5 back in the day because they released a Mac version and it worked on PowerPC Macs, so it was like one of a few games I could play. And I've tried to play a bit of the Master Chief Collection, but I've kind of bounced off of it, mostly due to the lack of proper subtitles through most of those games. That said, I recently tested the Season 8 update of Halo the Master Chief Collection, and I found out that they were putting in subtitles for the campaigns. They have, like, in-game, like, radio dialogue all subtitled in Reach, and hopefully the other Halo games as well. So I'm really looking forward to actually getting a chance to sit down and be able to play those games properly. So keep in mind, I'm coming into this with, real fresh eyes, especially compared to a series veteran. I'm also coming in with an open mind, just like everything I try and test out. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the good stuff in this preview flight, because there is a lot to cover there. And that's especially true because this is my first look at the game. So I'm probably going to cover stuff that other creators have gone over in the past, but bear with me here. Performance on this preview was rock solid on my PC. I'm on a Windows 11 preview, and my hardware is pretty beefy though. I'm on a Ryzen 5 3600 and a Radeon RX 6900 XT, so good performance is kind of a given with that sort of hardware. But it's nonetheless good to see that. I was running at 1080p, 120 frames per second on ultra settings throughout the weekend, no problems, easy peasy. The gameplay is really solid, and the weapon variety, even in this preview, is enough that you can kind of find what works for you. I, for example, really liked getting my hands on the Heat Wave. It had some weird firing patterns, it has a super aggressive ricochet, and I also really like the shock rifle, which delivers a hell of a kick just to whoever's on the other side of the barrel. The sound design absolutely rocks. Just about every weapon I got my hands on sounded amazing, it was appropriately punchy, and they were all distinct. Hit confirms and kills all have nice sound effects too, and the AI companions updates and chatter throughout combat are also a nice touch. Some of the AI can get a little too chatty.
Wow, you nailed that shot!
But, that's maybe just a me thing. In particular, I want to highlight the Sidekick pistol and the Commando rifle. The Sidekick just sounds super crisp. And the hammering sound of the Commandos, every single shot is just so satisfying. Moving through some other basics here, the visuals are coherent, menus are pretty easy to get through, customization options are pretty decent even in these early stages. but I really hope that we get some more flexibility on armor colors that isn't just, applying a coat of paint to everything you're equipping. Again, probably just a me thing though. I like a little bit more control. Who doesn't? Once you're in the game, maps as well have a pretty decent flow to them, but I think they're lacking some of the visual variety that I'm kind of used to seeing in Destiny 2. The Crucible maps have different areas that are all kind of visually distinct in some way, shape, or form, and so it makes it really easy to know, oh yeah, I'm on this side of the map right now. Where fragmentation in particular, I felt was pretty weak on this. Speaking of fragmentation, let's get into the focus of this weekend's test, which was Big Team Battle 12 versus 12. I had a really great time with this mode. I feel like it's in a really good spot in terms of scale. Given that Halo multiplayer kind of has those old school arena shooter roots, a lot of Halo's multiplayer is kind of focused on finding kit that you like out in the world one way or another, rather than coming in with a loadout that you really like. Given that reliance on finding stuff in the field, it's really nice that the spawn areas of Big Team Battle and Fragmentation, they have a lot of space towards the back, which kind of gives you this kind of area to prep in. You can find some kit, you can find some utility items, stuff like your grapple shots and repulsors and stuff. You can find all that, and then kind of brace yourself as you move into the center area. There's vehicles that move back there, so you can get into the action a little quicker. It's really well thought out, I feel like. However, I think one of the problems that Fragmentation has is that the utility items are really, really sparse. There's only a very small handful of them. There's nothing to say if you go down into the lower section of the map on your spawn. It's just kind of, it can be a little bit frustrating if you are new and trying to get your hands on some of that kit. And it meant that a lot of the new toys that Halo Infinite has on offer were tricky to find without going a bit out of the way. And I just think that's a bit of a bummer. The multiplayer experience in Halo Infinite feels like it's at its best when you're doing some zany shit, you're grappling through the air, firing at some guys below you, or trying to reflect a vehicle into people to get a kill. I think that's this level of absurdity, which feels really nicely integrated with the game and with the flow of it, but it lacks in some opportunity to be used, particularly in Big Team Battle. 4v4 arena matches also have this problem, but I feel like the map density compensates for that just a little bit. Throughout the weekend, I noticed that Big Team Battle has some other weak points, like Big Team Battle Total Control, which has players trying to seize control of 3 control points all at the same time. If you can get control of all 3 at the same time, you score. Big Team Battle Total Control was a mode that felt like it was very easy to get a long stalemate going in. And this, I think, particularly affects players who aren't on comms, because there isn't really a decent means to communicate your intent. Given that Big Team Battle divides teams into 3 squads, I feel like maybe it would benefit from something like the team order system that you see in Battlefield. Given that the multiplayer also features dynamic combat arcs from player characters, maybe it's also worth using that system to kind of communicate, we should attack A! Big Team Battle Capture the Flag is also prone to stalemating if you're not on comms. Again, this is another issue of collaboration with the team becoming very useful if, for whatever reason, you can't be on comms. Building on looking at Battlefield and looking at squad orders, I think maybe it's also worth looking at how Apex Legends handles communications. You can ping a location and kind of communicate your intent, I'm going to go here to attack, I'm going to go here to defend. Halo Infinite, at this point in time, just feels like it's missing that. Both Big Team Battle Capture the Flag and Big Team Battle Total Control were typically ending in a blowout or a just prolonged stalemate. It was there was no real in-between for those, and the nature of those stalemates also meant that there was a sudden death involved, and sudden death was a little bit confusing to me. You still respawned after sudden death started, so I'm kind of wondering what is going on there. To me, sudden death communicates there will be no respawns past this point, which allows teams to kind of just generate a win-loss result based on, like, can one team kill all of the other ones? And, oh, they win because they eliminated everyone. That sort of thing. It wasn't the case in Halo Infinite, and I'm still a little mystified by it. So, just another kind of minor point there. Dipping back to movement for a second. Movement in general feels really good. The pace is kind of, it's kind of spot on, honestly. And sprinting is a good addition compared to the other Halo titles, with the exception of Reach, which like had a sprint kit, but it also had armor. And it was altogether just kind of a weird attempt at trying to give some of the movement dynamism that Halo hasn't had. Swinging around on the Grapple Shot also feels really good, but it's limited by the fact that the visual indicator for the Grapple Shot is really, really tiny. I found it very hard to see. So I think maybe it needs an increase in size. Maybe it needs to be reworked a little bit to indicate a little bit more clearly, like, hey, you can latch onto this surface. And I think it would also benefit from a little bit of magnetism onto surfaces, so that you didn't have to fully center your crosshair over a thing you wanted to swing over. You give it some tolerance and allow it to swing that way. I feel like that would be very beneficial, because remember, I mentioned that, like, level of absurdity thing that Halo Infinite's combat had going on. Because you have to move the crosshair onto the surface that you want to grapple to, it can force you to disengage from a firefight in a way where you might want to close the distance really, really quickly. So you kind of have to either get good at flick shotting, or, if there was some magnetism, you could have a little bit of tolerance on that. Slightly tilt up, not fully disengaging from your existing fireflight, slightly tilt up, and then start flying through the air towards your enemy, and then continue engaging. That's just the sort of thing that I'd be looking at myself, though, personally. I do want to quickly talk about the other focus of the weekend, which was training mode, which I spent a little bit of time with. It allows you to go head-to-head with bots and tune a variety of settings to your liking. And that includes, what kit you spawn with, what equipment you start with, and that's a really helpful thing in this experience, I feel like. I felt a fair bit more confident in playing the game after some time in training, and I found that the bots were pretty competent too. I was playing against them on ODST difficulty, and they still, killed me a handful of times, especially before I got into the groove of fighting them. But after some time, you get into this flow state against the bots. You get a feel for all those weapons, and you go again, and you go again, and it starts falling together. Now on to some bigger critiques of what was previewed over the weekend. Unfortunately, my multiplayer experience definitely had a handful of technical difficulties. There were various rendering issues with the menu. Sometimes matchmaking would stop working in between matches, and it would force a restart of the game. It was just kind of not an ideal experience, but this is a technical preview. That sort of thing was to be expected, but it did mean that my time, streaming it live was kept to a minimum, just because it wasn't consistent enough for me to be able to do that. The other rough area that I looked at was some of the progression stuff. Namely, I was not super happy with the fact that it was kind of up in the air whether I would get any XP after a match. The other area that I felt was a bit rough when I looked at it was the progression. Namely, it was up in the air whether I'd be getting XP after a match, since progression in these flights is tied only to challenges and not performance. That means that getting XP after a match and feeling like you are making progress on your levels just isn't guaranteed. Combine that with the fact that after first few matches, you start to only get XP for completing matches once every 2 matches. I don't know if it goes any higher than that. I didn't play enough matches to find out. That means in the big team battle playlist that you'd be getting about 200 XP per hour, assuming that those matches run the full 15 minutes, and they usually did in big team battle playlists. So that's really slow progression, and it would feel very frustrating to me to have to play for 2.5 hours to go up one level on my battle pass. It doesn't feel right to me at the moment. That said, with all of these criticisms, this is just a technical preview. These issues will hopefully be, noticed by the team at 343, and they'll work to fix them up pre-launch. Overall, I came away with a really strong impression from this technical preview flight. I had a lot of fun playing Big Team Battle. I had a lot of fun with the game in general, in spite of all the issues that I had. So I'm looking forward to being able to spend some more time with it when it's been refined a little bit more. And I could see myself, putting a lot of time into it. At the time of writing, Halo Infinite's multiplayer will be available on December 9th, 2021 in Australia and New Zealand, which is December 8th in most other territories. So that's that. That's my first video in a hot minute. Thank you for watching all the way through. I hope you found this informative. If you want to support me a little bit for making this video, maybe hit the subscribe button. Maybe go follow me on Twitter. And thank you for watching.